What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Burrow. My name is Jacob Kelly, joined as always by Zach Weinberger and JJ Metz. And today we are joined here by Jeremy Werner of Illinois 24/7. How you doing today, sir?
Well, guys, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for joining us today, and we're really excited for this game on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it's for Illinois. I know it's a big chance to maybe get back on track. Last week against Penn State, they had a really good defensive performance, but the offense, which had been somewhat encouraging, especially Luke Altmaier, their quarterback, 4 interceptions. They had 5 turnovers overall, so they really had a chance at an upset. But a 1-2 start after an 8-5 season last year has not been great for them. They've lost 6 of their last 8 games going back to last year, so kind of been struggling a little bit. But this is a big opportunity for them to kind of bounce back before they get into the meat of Big Ten play. But obviously, FAU's looking to pull off an upset in a bye game, and they gave Purdue a scare last year, so going to be interesting.
Yeah, we're definitely hoping the game goes a little better than Clemson for us last week, which was in just so many ways a mess. Nonetheless, losing your quarterback for the season. But speaking of FAU, before we get into Illinois, I wanted to ask you. We had a similar question posed to Ryan Cantor last week, who covers Clemson football. What does, as an Illinois fan, as somebody who covers Power Five school, when you hear the name FAU, what generally comes to mind, one way or another, positive or negative?
Well, positive here recently is what Dusty May and that basketball program did. And Illinois is going to play FAU basketball on December 5th at the Jimmy V Classic in Madison Square Garden, which, if you guys haven't been there, phenomenal venue to go watch basketball. But so I know that. But obviously, with football, Lane Kiffin. I know Charlie Partridge was there before. Somebody that's Brett Bielema, comes from the Brett Bielema tree. So I know Charlie Partridge got a lot of talent there. But Lane Kiffin won big with them, kind of resuscitated his career there. Willie Taggart seems like he's coached every Florida program, ends up there. But Tom Herman is a guy I respect. Got to see him at Ohio State when he was the offensive coordinator there, and when they won a championship. And then you see it what he did at Houston and Texas. In Texas until now, kind of been chasing what he had done, which would have been a respectable program. But obviously, Steve Sarkisian has him back. So it's kind of one of those, Florida's group of 5 programs I have a lot of respect for because there's a lot of talent there. And they might get the leftovers from what Miami, Florida State, and all these other programs are really. You look at the Big Ten is loaded with Florida players, including Illinois. But there's so much talent in the Sunshine State that they can find really good skill players, and if you can build a solid offensive and defensive line, you can win a lot of games. We've seen USF have good years, and obviously Florida Atlantic have good years, and plenty of others. So, got some respect for them, and watched them last year against Purdue. I know the coach is gone now, but they competed. So I do think a program like Illinois has got to play well to not get a scare here.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeremy, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Just to get into the football side of things, Luke Altmaier, your quarterback, who is starting for the first year this year, he's thrown 7 interceptions so far, 4 of those coming in against Penn State last week. What do you think has been the cause of his turnover problem so far?
Luke Altmaier is a very talented player. Was a top 200 prospect coming out of Starkville High School in Mississippi. Alabama had offered him. Obviously, goes to Ole Miss. Was a backup to Matt Corral, who was a top 10 Heisman guy. His true freshman year was the top backup for Ole Miss. And actually, when Matt Corral got hurt, I think a lot of people remember that. He got hurt, played in the bowl game, played in the Sugar Bowl, and got hurt against Baylor. Luke Altmaier was the quarterback to come in and actually had a decent game. He actually looked the part. Last year, competed with Jackson Dart for that starting job. Took it into the season. That was a competition that went into the season. Luke Altmaier started a game last year against an FCS opponent. But he got hurt, and Jackson Dart took the job, played well. Ole Miss had a good season. So he decided to transfer, goes to Illinois. And to be honest with you, he was the biggest bright spot of this team the first 2 games. Ran the ball extremely well. He's a dual threat guy. He can make plays with his legs, but has really good touch on the ball. But we knew he was going to have growing pains, and he did the first couple games. There were a few throws that led to interceptions. One of those interceptions during his first 2 games was a bobble by his wide receiver, so I really don't hold that against him. But last week, he had about a month's worth of growing pains in 1 game against a really good defense in Penn State. but he just tried to do way too much. One throw, he just did not see the middle linebacker. Abdul Carter is one of the best middle linebackers in the country. That's a throw he can't make. The next throw, underthrow. His receiver, the next throw, an underthrow to his wide receiver. And then the final one was just a 3rd and 19. He threw it short of the sticks and just tried to force a ball in. He was just trying to do too much. And for anybody that's seen the movie or The Replacements, felt like he was in Shane Falco's quicksand, where it's just like you make one mistake, you try to fight out of it, and then you make more and more mistakes because of it. So, big storyline for Illinois this week is how does he bounce back? Because we'd seen some toughness from him mentally and physically the first couple weeks, and how he did bounce back from some mistakes, but he just couldn't do it against Penn State. So it'll be his 5th career start against FAU. He's a very talented player, but we're going to see how much that one terrible, probably the worst game of his life, carries over against FAU.
Jeremy, obviously you mentioned the 8-5 season from last year for Illinois. What's something that maybe compared to last year they're trying to build up upon? Because I think last year they've won 6 straight and then they lost 4 after that as well. What do you think could be built upon for this season?
Well, they lost a lot of talent to the NFL in the secondary. Devin Witherspoon was the number 5 overall pick in the draft, a guy who goes from no-star recruit to number 5 pick in the draft. He shut down one side of the field. He was an absolute eraser. But they also lost 2 guys in the middle of their defense. Their nickel, Quan Martin, was a second-round draft pick of the Commanders. And then Sidney Brown, who was really leader, kind of set the physical tone of that secondary. He was drafted at the top of the 3rd round by the defending NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles and is playing a role for them this year. So they had a ton of talent. They are still working guys in. They actually had an injury, season-ending injury to the guy they thought was going to be Sidney Brown's replacement, Matthew Bailey. He had a foot injury all offseason, comes back, first play, suffers a shoulder injury, is out for the season. So you feel for him, but their secondary still has some weakness. Their running back, they have to replace Chase Brown, who is Sidney Brown's twin brother, an All-American running back, ran for 1,600 plus yards last year, led Power 5 in rushing yards. They do not have an explosive guy like him at running back. Reggie Love's been solid, but then they had to replace their quarterback in Tommy DeVito, who's just a guy who could hit all these singles and doubles, didn't hit a lot of home runs, but just was really efficient and didn't make big mistakes. Well, Luke Altmaier's been maybe more of a home run threat, is making more mistakes. So they had a lot to replace. They had a couple of offensive linemen who were all big-time offensive linemen. Their offensive line is still trying to shake out. But what they do have is one of the best defensive fronts in the Big Ten, I think, in the country. And that's all led by Johnny Newton, who a lot of people have as the number 1 defensive tackle in the 2024 NFL draft. He has been an absolute game wrecker the last 2 weeks, guys. He is probably the best defensive tackle in the country. So FAU might have to double team him, but the problem is then Keith Randolph is a potential NFL player at defensive line, and then they have 2 really good edge rushers in Gabe Akis, who's a freshman All-American last year, and Seth Coleman, who's a potential NFL prospect. So their defensive front was not as good against dual-threat quarterbacks the first couple weeks. Jalen Daniels at Kansas is just ridiculous. Last week against a good pocket passer in Drew Aller, they were much better. They got home. They put pressure on him. They forced him into an under 50% completion day when he came into the game with about 80% completion rate. So I still think that defensive front, especially against a pocket passer like Daniel Richardson, is a big challenge for FAU in this game.
You just spoke about a lot of the experience that's been lost from the team from the draft last year, and there's still some experience on the team, but we saw Coach Prime talk about with Colorado how they're much more looking forward to taking kids from the transfer portal than trying to recruit some kids out of high school and hope they end up developing. From an Illinois perspective, do you think the transfer portal is something that they're going to go more towards, or try to sell kids on the idea of, hey, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State's getting in all these juniors, maybe even seniors that are going to fill up roster spots, going to fill up starting spots. You can come here today and have an impact immediately. What do you think the school is more looking to do?
Illinois would love all the 4- and 5-star prospects, but just their history, the last 30 years, they are not one of those programs. They've gotten a couple 4-stars in recent years, and Brett Bielema's gotten them in more battles. What made Brett Bielema successful at Wisconsin and why, Josh Whitman, the athletic director, wanted to hire him because of his ability to build programs that Illinois aspires to be. Illinois aspires to be Iowa. They aspire to be Wisconsin. Brett Bielema played at Iowa. He coached at Iowa. They aspire to be a Kansas State. Brett Bielema coached at Kansas State under Bill Snyder. So that's what they aspire to be. So they believe themselves to be a developmental program. They want to build with high school players. He still believes in doing that. Now, that doesn't mean they don't go get JUCOs. They've gone heavy in the JUCO market. They got about 6 players this year from the JUCO market. They've gotten transfers, Luke Altmaier being a huge one, Tommy DeVito. But they've kind of gone for the under the radar transfers, kind of the FCS or, group of 5 guys. They've gone more towards that. Like they got Demetrius Hill out of Florida International, was a freshman All-American last year. He had a season-ending injury, but those are kind of the guys that are looking to step up a level and maybe get that development at the Power 5 level. That's what they're looking to do. I think Brett Bielema was really skeptical of going too heavy with guys who all have individual desires to all got individual agendas. If they want to go somewhere just to make it to the NFL, of course you want to make it to the NFL, but he still wants them bought into the process and all of that. But I do think when they lose Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph, some of these players, because of Lovie Smith's recruiting struggles the last couple of years he was here, I do think Brett Bielema this offseason probably going to have to go to the transfer portal for Power 5 level guys next year. But Illinois believes in being a developmental program. This coaching staff is really strong at doing that. But in the Big Ten, man, you got to have talent. And with USC, Oregon, UCLA, Washington, 3 of those teams are in the top 10, I believe. They got to keep getting talent if they want to compete at the top of that conference.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeremy, what are your expectations of how the game is going to go this Saturday?
For Illinois, they need to get a lead, guys. They've led for 36 minutes of 180 minutes so far this year. Toledo, they were trailing most of that game against Kansas. They trailed, I think, the entire game. Penn State, they trailed most of the game. So they have barely led or tied during this entire season. And what Illinois aspires to be, especially offensively, is the physical team. Still Brett Bielema. Like Barry Lunny Jr., who came from UTSA, runs RPO. He runs spread, a lot of 11 personnel. They want to go tempo, but they still want to be a physical team while doing that. And they want to run the football. They haven't had the positions to be that because they've gotten behind so early. And they're just not a team that is really built to catch up from a big deficit. They're still trying to improve the wide receiver position. I think for Illinois, they want to be the physical team. They want to set the tone up front. Reggie Love has been good for them. He probably needs some more carries, but they need to set the tone with a run game that can open up their passing game. That's going to be important for them. Watching FAU, I have a lot of respect for LaJohntay Wester. I think he's a really good player. I think they're going to have to contain him. Xavier Scott, their nickel, who'll probably be on him most of the game, has been very encouraging so far this year. So they got to limit him and tackle him. I think that's the most important thing, is to tackle him because he's so explosive. But I do think FAU's offensive line and their quarterback are going to struggle with the pressure that they're going to face. Illinois runs a kind of a bare front, 5 defensive linemen up front, 1 safety, 20 yards off the ball, and then they like to be aggressive off of that. So I think Daniel Richardson's really going to have to get the ball out quickly, deliver the ball, and get some, break some tackles after that for them to have a big day, because I do think Illinois' defensive front should be able to control that side of the ball. For me, it's all about the offense with this game. Can the offense get physical? Can they establish the run? And then does Luke Altmaier bounce back? I think those are the most important things for Illinois.
Jeremy, obviously you mentioned Altmaier, Love. I think you guys also have Isaiah Williams out in the receiver position. Is there anybody else that maybe that's kind of under the radar that maybe is looking to improve within the program that you think is going to break out this season, or that's looking to improve?
I mentioned some of the freshmen. Isaiah Williams is the best player on the offense. I do want to mention him. He's exactly what Wester is to FAU. He's a former top 247 prospect who had offers from Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan as a wide receiver. He wanted to play quarterback. Illinois gave him that opportunity. And then when Brett Bielema got here, they had another starting quarterback, and Isaiah Williams wants to get to the NFL. He wants to play. So they moved him wide receiver, and he's been great ever since. So I do want to mention him. Tip Ryman's a tight end, pretty solid. I think they can get him more involved in the game. He's a physical guy, not really a game breaker at tight end or anything, but a physical big target for them. Casey Washington, Pat Bryant are the other starting wide receivers. But 2 freshmen who are 4-star prospects that Illinois got, I think could play a bigger role, because Josh McCray, their big back, has struggled so far this year. He had a really good freshman year, then lost all last year due to an injury. Just has not been the physical target they wanted. So 4-star running back Caden Fagan is one to watch. Iowa, Notre Dame had offered. Guys, he's 6'3", 250, really physical, not the I mean, he's a Derrick Henry-sized running back, but he got in late against Penn State, and unlike McCray, he just showed some explosiveness to get through the line of scrimmage and to fall forward. So I think you might see a little bit of him. And then a four-star prospect, Malik Elzy, had offers from basically every Big Ten program. He got in the game last week. Towards the end of the game, got a touchdown reception. Pat Bryant had a big first week with 2 touchdowns. He's been non-existent basically the last 2 weeks. They had high expectations for Pat Bryant. So if Pat doesn't, kind of improve this week, I can definitely see Malik Elzy getting more involved. But 2 guys on the secondary I want to mention that could be players to know that you might not know. Miles Scott, former walk-on wide receiver, moved to DB in the spring, played corner in the spring. Now is their free safety. He's a guy who you'll see him line 20 yards off the line of scrimmage, guys. And their safety at that position, that free safety, the last 2 years had 10 interceptions combined. Kirby Joseph is the NFL, was a third-round pick from playing that position. Then Kendall Smith had a cup of coffee with the Washington Commanders, but he had 5 interceptions at that position last year. So he had a pick 6 in week 1 that really helped turn the game against Toledo. And then Xavier Scott has been really, really good for them. Taz Nicholson's a good corner. So those are some of the other players to know.
Jeremy, this is the last question we got for you, and we do appreciate your time with us today. You've been covering Illinois for a long time. You've seen a lot of football, you've seen a lot of basketball, you've seen a lot of going on within the athletics. What has been your favorite memory getting to cover the Illini?
Last year, football was a joy just because it was so unexpected for them to go on a 6-game winning streak. They were 7-1, and they controlled their own destiny. And it was just so surprising, right? And to see guys turn into, we thought Devin Witherspoon could be an NFL draft pick. He'd be like a 3rd or 4th rounder. He ends up the number 5 pick in the draft. Sidney Brown and Chase Brown, I was at their draft party up in Canada. So to see those guys have success, but they blew it, guys. They had a chance to win the Big Ten West, and they ended up doing it. But I think the best thing I covered at Illinois, because I've covered a lot of bad things. Illinois had a really down decade in the 2010s. A lot of turmoil, a lot of scandal. It's sad, but the 2020-21 basketball team, Io DeSumo, Kofi Coburn, Trent Frazier, but they were number 1 seed. They got upset by Loyola, but I was one of the few to actually watch that team in person. The Illini fans were not able to watch Io DeSumo be an All-American or Kofi Coburn be an All-American that year, and Illinois to have its best basketball season since they made the national championship game in 2005 with D. Brown, Darren Williams, Luther Head. And I will always hold dear that I was in the building when those guys were doing that, when I would assume was hitting clutch shot after clutch shot. And then finally we get to the Big Ten tournament, and they had some fans at Lucas Oil Stadium. It was all Illinois fans. Just a bunch of Illinois fans. It was 6,000 people. It felt like that year, guys, take you back to 2020. It felt like there were 100,000 fans there. And Illinois had an unbelievable run that weekend, solidified the number 1 seed by winning the Big Ten tournament championship. So that was the best season I've covered outside of Illinois golf, which is really good around here, guys. But Illinois basketball having that season was probably the one I'll cherish the most, because I was one of the few who was lucky enough to see it in person.
Well, we can definitely relate to you on that end with the FAU success with the basketball team last year, and hoping that transitions into this year. But Jeremy, we really appreciate your time with us today. Thank you for the very good insight that you've given to your football team. And I mean, what more can I say? That we're just really excited to see the game on Saturday.
Enjoy the game, guys, and have a good season.
Thank you, man. You too. Appreciate you. And again, thank you to Jeremy for joining us on the show today. Very good insight for the Illini football program. And a program that last year has gone in a positive way with their best season since 2007. This year, off to a 1-2 start, off to a little bit of a rocky start, but just is also the FAU Owls, who are also 1-2 and are definitely in a bumpy situation, just first on the issues. Casey Thompson going down with injury. We know he went down in the game against Clemson. Wasn't sure how the severity was. But, JJ, when you first heard that Casey Thompson was going to be done with the season with the ACL injury, what was your immediate reaction?
Well, first off, I want to wish Casey a speedy recovery.
Of course.
That's most important, obviously. I mean, we want him. Health comes way before this game. We want him to get healthy. We have thoughts and prayers for you, Casey, and hopefully you can heal up soon. Secondly, I don't think it's that big of an impact that he's not going to play. I mentioned in the last podcast that in the last episode that it might be time for Dan Richardson. Now, this is nothing against Casey Thompson. I just think that it might be time for Daniel, and he really proved why I said that in the first half against Clemson. I mean, he threw a couple of interceptions there and turned the ball over. But what went to my mind first is next man up, and we're going to see what Daniel can do this week, and we'll see his strengths, and we're really going to see how good he can be. As long as he doesn't make mistakes, I'll be totally fine with it. But obviously, the main point of this is I wish Casey to get back too.
Zach, JJ's obviously way more open to the idea of Daniel Richardson being there in place of Casey. But how big of a drop-off do you think it is that we're going to be going with Daniel Richardson likely for the rest of the season now?
I'm gonna agree more with JJ a bit, just because the past couple of weeks of offense have been dreadful, right? Which, I mean, again, the team is a work in progress, as Herman says, and I don't even think that's coach speak as for an excuse. I just think it's true. They kind of look like it. So obviously, Casey Thompson is, I guess, more on the talented side and stuff like that. But Daniel Richardson has been with this team since the spring. He has the built-in chemistry with the skill position players. Just speaking to not only him the other day, but also LaJohntay Wester and other players. I mean, D. Rich is their guy, you know? So, like, I don't think in terms of chemistry, things are going to fall off that badly. So I think it could be a seamless transition. But even though I would say, again, this game against Illinois, when you face a defensive line like that and just a team like that, you might have some growing pains. But when it comes to the conference play, which is the games that really matter after this, it could be kind of well worth to kind of get a guy that's been there the whole year to kind of be in there. So, again, it was obviously horrible what happened to Casey. Again, just, you know, all that hype that FAU had, Herman had him, and then 3 games into the season. That's always my worry with these big money games like you face against Clemson, and where it's like, you know, you're probably going to lose anyways. So you want to have a healthy team after the fact. And obviously the worst case scenario happened, not just Casey, but, you know, the 3-headed running backs is something that we have to look at as well. But in terms of D. Rich, I think he'll be fine. You know, what I will, I guess, fight back against JJ is that if Casey was still healthy and, you know, kept up that performance, I don't think you move on from him unless he really struggled against conference play opponents. But D. Rich, again, he's a guy that's been in the system before. You know, he was with Fry in Central Michigan, so there is still that familiarity. So, again, D. Rich is the guy, and we'll see how he does.
Yeah, it's a pretty ideal scenario if you do have to lose a quarterback, having somebody who's very comfortable with the offensive coordinator already and has actually been there longer with the program than the previous starter was, and also having it happen before conference play starts, having one more non-conference game, then having that bye week, then having conference play. So he has times to get acclimated to the first team offense, has been practicing with the second team, and will definitely be a good to go by the time conference play comes around. Should be fully up to speed as a starter, if not already. But Zach, you did just touch on the next point a little bit. It's not just the only injury that we got going on. We do have all 3 running backs currently a question mark as to whether they'll be available or not on Saturday, as well as in the wide receiver department. Jaquan Armani Eli Adams is still down with his injury. This could go to either of you guys, whoever wants to take this first. Like, there's so much going wrong right now. 1 and 2 injuries. Where can we look to find positivity with this team?
I'll just touch a little bit of updates, because, again, being there Tuesday, again, Larry was practicing, maybe limited, but was practicing. Kobe was also there. And, again, Zuberi is doubtful, so he's probably not going to be there Saturday. But there's been a lot of discussion I've seen from FAU fans and about, like, you know, because you want to have a full team going into conference play and not to risk the injury still, would you sit Larry? Would you sit these guys and see what you have in players like a Kayvon Walker or a Robert Armes? Can they kind of fill in, you know, against Illinois and possibly, you know, be productive? I think that's interesting. But again, it's like, I see why they say that, but you want, again, even though the game is not as important as the conference games, this game is way more winnable than it was Clemson, right? So to me, it's like, if they're healthy, if they're ready to play, if the doctors clear them, go for it. But that's going to be something to watch there. But like you said, even Armani Eli Adams and even Jaquan Burns still in concussion protocol. You know, it's like this team has got the injury bug bad. So I'm hoping that that bye week is coming in at a really awesome point, because after this game, you got the time to rest and hopefully be good for conference play. So the team is in a broken shape, but again, as time goes on, we'll see how they kind of overcome it.
Yeah, it's going to be a good opportunity for some of those younger players to step up. This is the opportunity that you get. Sometimes it is just a guy goes down and you have to go up, and somebody has to step up. Somebody has to rise to the top. So this will be the opportunity to prove themselves on a pretty big platform going against a Power 5 school in Illinois. We saw last year what we did to Purdue, nearly coming away with a victory. So maybe some of those younger guys can step up and do what the team couldn't finish last year. So with that, all that being said, JJ, I'll start this off with you. If FAU is going to go up to Illinois and take down the Illini, what has to go right? What has to happen for FAU in order to get the victory?
Daniel Richardson has to have the game of his life. Now, to be honest, this Illinois team is talented, very talented, way more talented at every single position over this FAU team. And Daniel Richardson, I wouldn't say he has to play the game of his life. He just can't turn the ball over at all. He's got to be the game manager that we expect him to be, and no turning the ball over. And if we have no turnovers, we have a real shot of winning this game.
Yeah, and the same question to you, Zach. What are you looking for to see FAU implement to try to take the victory?
Especially on defense, you have to pressure Altmaier. Again, this defensive line of FAU is talented. It's deep. Besides the game wrecker and Evan Anderson, you have guys like Jacob Merrifield, Latrell Jean, Decarius Hawthorne, Jaden Wheeler. I mean, the list goes on. So you want to see them get at the quarterback a little bit more, cause a little bit of pressure, and then on the offensive side, like what JJ said about Richardson, you want to start very fast here. You don't want to. You want to have a balanced attack, not like how it was against Ohio, where you run the ball 11 times, depending on who's healthy, right? But still, so you want to start fast, because if you make mistakes against a higher talented team, whatever you want to say, you have to capitalize on mistakes. You have to kind of capitalize on every opportunity that you get. So that, to me, that's the two keys of this game. Plus, again, they're definitely battle tested. That's for sure. Especially going into a game like Clemson, the huge, college football atmosphere and environment. And again, Daniel Richardson, he's played in games like that before. Maybe not on the same level as a Casey Thompson in Nebraska and Texas and stuff like that, but he's played some big games. So again, maybe he can provide that sort of reassurance that the rest of the guys need there. So again. But once again, when it comes to expectations, again, I think fans should temper them. Because again, I still think that there is growing pains to overcome here. Sure, I think they'll be more competitive than they were against Clemson, but again, a lot of things have to go right, especially in terms of how injured this team is and other factors.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be more eyes on the defense than most weeks. Now, the offense has been what we were so excited to see play out in the offseason. All the talk was how Casey looking, how they're going to get the ball into the hands of all the running backs. LeJonte and Jaquan coming back and working together as a 1 and 2. So now it's the time of the defense. So there's just so many injuries on offense, and there's still a few injuries on defense themselves. But how are you going to stop a Power 5 program? How are you going to stop a quarterback that is a dual threat quarterback? He's second on the team in rushing yards. Can you force him to make some mistakes, get in his face at defensive line, cause pressure, and try to make him throw a turnover, try to get a fumble, try to get something to get yourself on the plus side of the field early on in drives and early on in this ball game. So, with all that being said, we've heard from the Illinois perspective. We've given our thoughts, and JJ, are we feeling as overzealous as we were last week with the Clemson game today for the Illinois game?
First off, I do want to apologize to the Clemson fan base in the program. Obviously, I was wrong, and you guys are good. You guys are very good. So, I strongly apologize, and that will not happen again to anyone. With that being said, I've really been going back and forth on this game, but Illinois is going to win this game, and Illinois will win this game. They are the better team over FAU, and as I mentioned at every position. I'm gonna say that Illinois wins this game 17-0. Daniel Richardson won't be able to get the ball going at all, and we're not gonna score any points.
Okay, JJ. Well, I mean, is that JJ? Is that JJ? Did you and your brother switch spots or something for the podcast today? Because I mean, the young man that we've seen going on with all these long rants about FAU is the best school to ever exist and how we're going to defeat Clemson. Did you say we're going to beat them by 40 or something last week? I don't even remember what it was, but it was definitely outlandish.
I said we would beat Clemson 35-31, first of all, so not that outlandish.
So Zach, you've been more the voice of reason over the last few weeks. Are you going to take the JJ role today? What are you going to do?
I will not. I will never take the JJ role. What I will do is that I don't think they're a bad team. Let me just say that. I do think that we will see the team's true colors a little bit on Saturday, but mostly in conference play. We'll truly see how they kind of match up to the rest of the conference. But I do think they lose this game once again. I think they'll be more competitive this time around, just kind of the same way where people kind of wrote off FAU last season against Purdue. Played very competitive, had a chance to win the game at the very end, but I say maybe I could see this game going where maybe it's a very low-scoring game, competitive game in the first half, where both teams on offense are really struggling, and we see kind of a defensive slugfest here. But I think Illinois sort of trails away here. So, I'm not going to say that Illinois blows it out. I think the score that I wrote down for like a guest article that I was in earlier this week, I put like maybe 28-13, I think was the score. So I think anywhere around there with an Illinois win. But I do think that FAU is going to be heavily battle tested, and it might be good for Daniel Richardson to kind of take an atmosphere like this and press forward into the bye week. So again, I'm not going to say that the team is bad or whatever about the players. These players are hard competitors. So I think we'll see that on Saturday. But again, for fans, temper the expectations, and it's a long season. I don't make judgments of the team 2 or 3 games into the season, especially when you get a guy like all these injuries and stuff. So it's going to be interesting.
As the loyal and gracious host of this show, I'm going to ride with the ship. If it elevates us into the sunset, or if it crashes to the bottom of the sea, is how I'm going to ride. And I'm going to continue with the mentality. I picked FAU to win last week. I'm picking them to win this week. Deal with it. I think FAU goes in there with a true underdog mentality. There's just so many reasons why we should lose this game. I mean, yes, there is a talent discrepancy. They've had so many players enter the draft recently and have success in the NFL. It's a Power 5 program. It's the Big Ten. FAU's got all these injuries. Everybody on offense that anybody knows really as a casual fan is hurt. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're going to go in there with a true underdog mentality. I'm sure that's something that the coaching staff has been telling them all week long is nobody expects us to win. They may be saying, and not even our fans expect us to win. Going up to Daniel Richardson, like, hey, they all think you're the backup. They all think that you're not going to be good enough. Go ahead and show them why we brought you in here first as a quarterback, and then eventually brought Casey in. And just go out and do the best you can. Play with heart. Play strong. And with that being said, I'm going to take FAU with a 23-20 victory. I'm going to go with a last-second field goal just to really stick it in there. And, FAU moves to 2-2 on the season before conference play. I mean, I'm going to be optimistic, as much optimistic as I can. I'm not going to be unreasonable with you guys. I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can be. And obviously, it is going to be a very difficult thing to go in there and take the victory, but it is not impossible. We're not playing Alabama. We're not playing like the Kansas City Chiefs. With all respect to Illinois, they are a team that is beatable, and we saw over the last couple weeks how they can be beaten. So I'm going to stick with my guns. I'm going to stick with my school. I'm going to ride the ship until it burns and crashes, or until somebody else gets injured, I guess, and say that FAU is going to take away the victory. So take that, JJ. But with that being said, We really appreciate you guys watching today inside the Burrow. We really appreciate it. If you guys want some more FAU content, go over to FAUowlsnest.com where you can check out a ton of more FAU content, especially more up-to-date stuff every single day over there on the website. So make sure you go check out FAUowlsnest.com. There will be a link down below in the description. But we thank you guys very much for watching today. If you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, get involved in the comments. Let us know your score predictions. Let us know why JJ is crazy. Let us know why Zach is wrong, and let me know why I'm right. Get down there, go ahead and do that, and also have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.